The autumn wind howled through the Montana Territory like a wounded animal, carrying with it the bite of early frost and the promise of a harsh winter to come. The year was 1847, and the land stretched endlessly beneath a sky the color of old pewter, broken only by the jagged teeth of distant mountains. Abigail Thornfield stood on the porch of her cabin, watching the sun sink behind those peaks, painting the clouds in shades of copper and blood. 6 months had passed since they'd lowered Samuel into the hard ground behind the barn. 6 months of wrestling with ornery cattle, mending fences that seemed to break faster than she could fix them, and lying awake at night listening to the wolves howl in the darkness. The other ranchers had been kind enough at first, offering help and condolences in equal measure, but as summer faded into fall, so too had their visits. A widow alone on a ranch was like a candle in a windstorm. Everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the flame went out. Abigail pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, the rough wool catching on her work-worn hands. At 32, she was still young by most accounts, but the frontier had a way of aging a person. The mirror showed lines around her green eyes that hadn't been there 2 years ago, and her honey-colored hair, once her pride, now stayed pinned in a practical bun from dawn to dusk. She was about to turn back inside when she saw them, 2 figures on horseback, dark silhouettes against the dying light. Her hand moved instinctively to the Winchester propped against the doorframe. Travelers were rare this far from town, and those who did come calling after dark rarely brought good news. The riders moved slowly, and as they drew closer, Abigail could make out more details. A man, tall in the saddle, wearing a long duster that had seen better days. Behind him, clinging to his waist, was a smaller figure, a child. They stopped at the gate, and the man dismounted with the careful movements of someone who'd spent too many hours in the saddle. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "Sorry to trouble you this late. Name's Nathaniel Blackwood. I was told in town you might be needing a ranch hand." Abigail kept the rifle within reach but didn't raise it. "Who told you that?" "Fellow at the general store. Said the widow Thornfield was trying to run her place alone." He paused, then added, "Said you were too proud to ask for help but might not turn it away if it came knocking." Despite herself, Abigail felt her lips twitch. That sounded like old Henry at the store, meddling as always. "And you just happened to be looking for work?" The man removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with premature gray and a face weathered by sun and wind. "Truth is, ma'am, we've been riding for near on 3 weeks. My daughter and I, we need a place to winter. I'm a good hand with cattle, can mend anything that's broken, and I don't drink nor gamble. You'd get honest work for fair wages." It was then that the child slipped down from the horse, and Abigail saw her clearly for the first time. A girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with tangled dark hair and eyes too large for her thin face. She clutched a cloth doll to her chest, and even in the fading light, Abigail could see the road dust on her dress and the weariness in her small shoulders. "Papa," the girl whispered, tugging at his coat. "I'm cold." Something twisted in Abigail's chest. She thought of the empty rooms in the cabin, the silence that pressed against her ears each night, the way she sometimes caught herself setting 2 places at the table before remembering. "What's your daughter's name?" she asked, her voice softer than before. "Evangeline," Nathaniel replied, "though she answers to Evie." Abigail looked at them, really looked. The man's boots were worn down at the heels, his clothes mended but clean. The child's dress had been let down at least twice, the hem showing different ages of fabric. But it was their eyes that decided her. She'd seen that particular weariness before, in her own mirror. It was the look of people who'd lost something that couldn't be replaced and were still learning how to carry on without it. "You can put your horses in the barn," she said finally. "There's fresh hay in the loft. When you're done, come to the house. I've got stew on the stove, and it's too much for one person anyway." Relief flickered across Nathaniel's face, though he tried to hide it. "We're obliged, ma'am. Truly." Abigail watched them lead their horses toward the barn, the little girl's hand firmly clasped in her father's. The wind picked up again, sending dried leaves skittering across the yard like tiny bones. Winter was coming, sure enough, but for the first time since Samuel's passing, the thought didn't fill her with dread. She went inside to check the stew and add more wood to the fire. The cabin felt different somehow, as if it were waking from a long sleep. She found herself taking down 3 bowls instead of 1, 3 spoons, 3 cups. The movements felt rusty but right, like stretching muscles that had been still too long. Through the window, she could see the soft glow of a lantern in the barn. The man would be thorough, she suspected. He had the look of someone who understood that first impressions mattered, especially when you had a child depending on you. Abigail paused in her preparations, struck by a sudden memory. Samuel had knocked on her father's door 10 years ago, hat in hand, looking for work. She'd watched from the stairs as a 15-year-old girl, captivated by the young man's earnest face and steady gaze. Now here she was, on the other side of that door, holding the power to change someone's fortune with a simple yes or no. The knock came sooner than expected. When she opened the door, Nathaniel and Evangeline stood on the porch, their faces scrubbed clean with water from the pump. The child's hair had been hastily braided, and she'd changed into a dress that was worn but cleaner than the one she'd arrived in. "Come in," Abigail said, stepping aside. "Warm yourselves by the fire." They entered cautiously, and Evangeline's eyes went wide as she took in the cabin's interior. It wasn't fancy frontier homes rarely were, but Abigail had kept it neat and welcoming. Quilts made by her mother hung on the walls, and Samuel's books still lined the shelf he'd built their first winter together. "It's pretty," Evangeline whispered, then looked up at her father as if afraid she'd spoken out of turn. "It's all right," Abigail assured her. "And thank you. Would you like to help me set the table?" The child nodded eagerly, carefully placing the cloth doll on a chair before following Abigail to the cupboard. Her small hands shook slightly as she carried the bowls, treating them like precious things. Over supper, the cabin filled with something it had been missing: conversation. Nathaniel ate with the careful appreciation of someone who'd gone hungry before, while Evangeline struggled to keep her eyes open between bites. "How long since her mother?" Abigail asked quietly, nodding toward the drowsing child. 4 months, Nathaniel replied, his voice rough. "Fever took her. We had a small place in Wyoming, but after—" He trailed off, then straightened. "Well, sometimes staying put hurts worse than moving on." Abigail understood that truth in her bones. "And you've been traveling since then?" "Working where we could. Harvest season helped some, but most folks don't want to take on a hand with a child in tow." He glanced at his daughter, and his weathered face softened. "Can't say I blame them, but I couldn't leave her with strangers. Not after everything." The fire crackled in the hearth, sending shadows dancing across the walls. Outside, something howled. Wolf or wind. It was hard to tell. Evangeline stirred, whimpering softly, and without thinking, Abigail reached over to smooth the child's hair. "There's a small room off the kitchen," she found herself saying. "Used to be for storage, but it's got a window and room for 2 bedrolls. If you're minded to stay, that is $30 a month plus board, and I'll expect you to earn it." Nathaniel's head came up sharply. "You're offering us the job." "I'm offering you a trial," Abigail corrected. 2 weeks to prove you're as good as you say. The land here doesn't forgive mistakes. Mr. Blackwood, I've got 300 head of cattle, 20 horses, and winter breathing down our necks. I need someone who can work hard and smart both." "You'll get it," he said simply. "You have my word." They shook hands across the table, his calluses matching hers. It was a frontier contract, sealed with nothing but honor and necessity. Evangeline had fallen fully asleep now, her head pillowed on her arms, the cloth doll trapped beneath her cheek. "Let me," Nathaniel said, starting to rise, but Abigail waved him back. "Finish your coffee. I'll show her to the room." She lifted the child carefully, surprised by how light she was. Evangeline stirred but didn't wake, her arms coming up automatically to wrap around Abigail's neck. The trust in that simple gesture made something crack inside Abigail's chest, like ice breaking on a frozen stream. The storage room had been cleaned that very morning, as if she'd somehow known. She laid Evangeline on the old feather mattress and pulled a quilt over her small form. In the lamplight, the child looked even younger, all sharp angles and hollow places that spoke of too many missed meals. When she returned to the main room, Nathaniel was standing by the fire, staring into the flames. "I'm grateful, Mrs. Thornfield." "More than you know." "Abigail," she corrected. "And save your gratitude until you see what needs doing. This place has been fighting me every step since—" She stopped, swallowed. "Well, every step." He turned to face her, and she saw understanding in his eyes. "How long for you? 6 months? Gets easier," he said quietly. "Not easy, but easier." They stood there for a moment, two people carved hollow by loss, finding an unexpected kinship in their shared grief. Then Nathaniel cleared his throat and stepped back. "I'll turn in, if that's all right. Like to get an early start tomorrow." "Sunup," Abigail agreed. "I'll have breakfast ready by 5. He touched his hat brim and disappeared into the small room. Abigail heard him moving quietly, settling his daughter more comfortably, speaking to her in low, gentle tones, though she likely couldn't hear. Alone again, Abigail banked the fire and prepared for bed, but sleep felt far away. Instead, she stood by her window, looking out at the barn, the corrals, the endless sweep of land that had once felt like a promise and now felt like a burden. Tomorrow would tell whether she'd made a wise choice or a foolish one. But tonight, for the first time in months, the cabin didn't echo with emptiness. Somewhere in the darkness, a child slept safely, and a father kept watch. It wasn't her family, might never be. But it was life, stubborn and persistent, refusing to be driven away by grief or hardship. The wind had died down, and stars began to show through the breaking clouds. Abigail touched the glass briefly, thinking of Samuel, wondering what he'd make of her decision. Then she turned away and made ready for bed. Tomorrow would come soon enough, bringing with it all the challenges of keeping a ranch alive in unforgiving country. But tonight, she wasn't facing it alone. The smell of coffee and frying bacon pulled Nathaniel from sleep before dawn. For a moment, he lay still, disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling and the soft breathing of his daughter beside him. Then memory returned. The widow's kindness, the warm meal, the promise of work. He rose carefully, not wanting to wake Evangeline, and pulled on his boots. In the main room, Abigail was already at the stove, her movements efficient and practiced. She'd changed into a work dress and apron, her hair neatly pinned. The table was set for 3. "Morning," she said without turning. "Coffee's ready. Breakfast will be another few minutes." Nathaniel poured himself a cup, savoring the warmth. Real coffee had been a luxury these past months. "I can start on chores while you finish. Eat first. You'll need it." She glanced back at him. Your daughter still sleeping. Like a stone, first real bed she's had in weeks. Abigail nodded and returned to her cooking. They worked in companionable silence until Evangeline appeared in the doorway, clutching her doll and rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Papa." "Right here, sunshine." Nathaniel held out his arms, and she ran to him, burying her face in his shirt. "You hungry?" She nodded against his chest, then peeked shyly at Abigail. In the morning light, the child looked even more fragile than she had the night before, her dress hanging loose on her thin frame. "Good morning, Evangeline," Abigail said gently. "Would you like some milk with your breakfast?" The girl's eyes widened. "Real milk? Fresh from the cow this morning?" Evangeline looked up at her father as if seeking permission for such luxury. At his nod, she whispered, "Yes, please, ma'am." They sat down to a breakfast of bacon, biscuits, and fried eggs. Nathaniel noticed how Abigail watched Evangeline eat, a soft concern in her eyes when the child carefully hoarded half her biscuit in her pocket. "There's plenty more," Abigail said quietly. You don't need to save it." Evangeline flushed and looked down. "Mama always said not to waste." "Your mama was right. But there's a difference between not wasting and going hungry. In this house, you eat until you're full." After breakfast, Nathaniel prepared to start work, but Evangeline clung to his hand. "Where are you going, Papa?" "Just outside to help Mrs. Thornfield with the ranch. You'll be able to see me from the window." "Can't I come?" Nathaniel hesitated, but Abigail spoke up. "The hen house needs checking for eggs. Think you could help me with that while your papa tends the horses?" Evangeline bit her lip, clearly torn between staying close to her father and the novelty of gathering eggs. Curiosity won. "I could help," she offered tentatively. As they stepped outside into the crisp morning air, Nathaniel got his first real look at the ranch in daylight. The main buildings were sound, but everywhere he saw signs of deferred maintenance: fence posts leaning, gates hanging crooked, equipment in need of repair. A ranch this size was too much for one person, especially with winter approaching. "I'll start with the corral fence," he told Abigail. "That corner section won't last another storm." She studied him for a moment, as if taking his measure anew. "Tools are in the barn. You'll find what you need." They separated, Abigail leading Evangeline toward the hen house while Nathaniel headed for the barn. He could hear his daughter's delighted gasp when the first hen yielded a warm egg. The work was hard but satisfying. As the sun climbed higher, Nathaniel lost himself in the rhythm of it, measuring, cutting, hammering. His hands remembered this dance, even after months of wandering. From time to time, he glanced toward the house, catching glimpses of Evangeline following Abigail like a small shadow. Near midday, they converged at the water pump. Evangeline's dress was dusty, but her face glowed with excitement. "Papa, I collected 12 whole eggs, and Mrs. Abigail showed me how to scatter corn for the chickens, and there's a cat in the barn with kittens. Sounds like you've been busy." He ruffled her hair, his heart lifting at her enthusiasm. It had been too long since he'd seen her truly smile. "The gray tabby had her litter 2 weeks ago," Abigail explained. 5 kittens, all healthy. "Can I see them again after lunch?" Evangeline asked hopefully. "If your father says it's all right." Nathaniel nodded, grateful for the distraction. Keeping Evangeline occupied while he worked had been one of his constant worries on the road. Lunch was a simple affair: cold beef, bread, and preserves, eaten at the kitchen table. Abigail had a map spread out beside her plate, marking water sources and grazing areas. "The north pasture's best for wintering," she explained, tracing the boundaries with her finger. "Samuel always said—" She stopped abruptly, her hand stilling. "Your husband knew the land well," Nathaniel said carefully. "He did." Her voice was steady, but he saw the effort it cost her. "Bought this place 8 years ago with nothing but dreams and determination. Built it up from scrubland to what you see now. He'd be proud you're keeping it going." Abigail's laugh was short and bitter. "Keeping it going? I'm barely holding on. Half the town expects me to sell before first snow." "Will you?" She met his eyes squarely. "Not if I can help it." After lunch, Evangeline curled up on the hearth rug with one of the kittens Abigail had allowed her to bring inside. The doll sat forgotten as she gently stroked the tiny creature, whispering secrets into its fur. Watching her, Abigail felt that crack in her chest widen. Does she remember her mother well? Nathaniel paused in cleaning his tools. "Some days more than others. The doll was Martha's. Made it for Evie's 4th birthday." He smiled sadly. "She talks to it sometimes. Tells it things she can't tell me. Children need their secrets." "That they do." He was quiet for a moment. "Your husband. Were there children?" "No." The word came out harder than she intended. "We tried for years, but the land doesn't give up its gifts easily out here. I'm sorry." "Don't be. Can't mourn what never was." But her eyes lingered on Evangeline, betraying the lie in her words. The afternoon brought new challenges. While checking the barn, Nathaniel discovered several boards rotting in the hayloft floor. dangerous for anyone who didn't know to avoid them. The chicken coop door barely hung on its hinges, and the tool handles were loose, neglected since spring. He made a mental list as he worked, prioritizing what needed immediate attention versus what could wait. By evening, he'd repaired the worst of the corral fence and rehung the coop door. His shoulders ached pleasantly, the kind of tiredness that came from honest work. Supper was a livelier affair than breakfast. Evangeline chattered about her day, the kittens, the chickens, the pretty blue curtains in the kitchen window. She'd lost some of her initial shyness, addressing Abigail directly now instead of hiding behind her father. "Mrs. Abigail, do you know any stories? What kind of stories? Mama used to tell me about princes and castles." Her face fell slightly. "But I can't remember them all anymore." Abigail considered. "I don't know many castle stories, but my grandmother used to tell me about the old days, when the frontier was even wilder than now. Would you like to hear about the time she faced down a bear with nothing but a rolling pin?" Evangeline's eyes went round. "Really? Really?" She was making pies for a church social when this big black bear came sniffing around her kitchen. As Abigail spun the tale, Nathaniel watched the two of them across the table. His daughter hung on every word, gasping at the dangerous parts and giggling when Abigail described his grandmother chasing the bear with flour-covered hands. It was the most animated he'd seen Evangeline since Martha's death. When the story ended, Evangeline yawned hugely. "That was better than castles. Time for bed. Sunshine." Nathaniel said, "Will you tell another story tomorrow, Mrs. Abigail?" "If you'd like." As Nathaniel carried his drowsy daughter to their room, he heard her murmur, "She's nice. Papa, not mean like Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house." "No," he agreed softly. "She's not." When he returned to help with the dishes, Abigail waved him off. "You've done enough today. Besides, we need to discuss tomorrow's work." They sat by the fire, and she outlined the immediate needs: bringing the cattle down from summer pasture, checking the winter feed supply, reinforcing the barn before the first heavy snow. "It's a lot," she admitted. "Maybe too much." "It's manageable," Nathaniel countered. "But you'll need more than one hand come spring. This place could support a full crew." "Could have," she corrected. "When Samuel was alive, we had plans." She shook her head. "Doesn't matter now. I'll be lucky to keep it running through winter." "Why stay? Must be easier places for a woman alone." Abigail stared into the fire. "You ever build something with your own hands? Mr. Blackwood, pour your sweat and blood and dreams into every fence post, every acre." "I have." "Then you know why I can't leave. This land has pieces of us in it, Samuel and me. Selling would be like selling his grave." They sat quietly, listening to the fire pop and the wind rise outside. Finally, Nathaniel stood. "Better get some rest. Long day tomorrow. Mr. Blackwood." "Nathaniel." She looked up at him. "Thank you for the work today. But also, it was good to hear laughter in this house again. Thank you for giving us the chance." As he prepared for bed, Nathaniel reflected on the day. He'd worked harder ranches and faced tougher bosses. But something about this place, these two souls nursing their private griefs while building something together, felt different, fragile and precious, like the first green shoots after a hard winter. In her bed, Evangeline stirred. "Papa?" "Yes, sunshine. Do you think Mama can see us from heaven?" His throat tightened. "I'm sure she can." "Good. I want her to know we found a nice place, with kittens and stories and everything." "I think she knows." Evangeline settled back into sleep, one small hand reaching out to touch her father's arm, as if reassuring herself he was still there. Nathaniel lay awake longer, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house settling, the distant howl of coyotes, the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods. Through the thin wall, he could hear Abigail moving about, banking the fire, checking the locks, the sounds of someone ending their day alone, as they had too many nights before. But tonight was different. Tonight, the house held more than one lonely soul, Perhaps that was enough. Not healing, not yet, but the first step toward it. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, they were safe, fed, and sheltered. On the frontier. Sometimes that was all the miracle you could ask for. The first week passed in a blur of dawn to dusk labor. Each morning, Nathaniel rose before the sun, finding coffee already brewing, and Abigail bent over her ledgers, calculating feed costs against dwindling funds. He'd grown accustomed to her quiet efficiency, the way she moved through tasks with an economy born of necessity. What surprised him more each day was her patience with Evangeline. The child had blossomed under Abigail's gentle attention, following her about the house like a devoted puppy. Where once she'd been silent and withdrawn, now she chattered freely, helping with simple chores and absorbing every scrap of knowledge Abigail offered. "See how I'm holding the needle?" Abigail demonstrated one evening, showing Evangeline how to mend a torn apron. Small stitches, close together. That's what keeps the fabric strong. Evangeline's tongue poked out in concentration as she tried to copy the movements. "Like this. Just like that. You're a natural." Nathaniel watched from across the room, pretending to oil a harness while his heart swelled at the sight. Martha had always intended to teach their daughter such things, but illness had stolen that chance. Now here was Abigail, filling that void without being asked, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The next morning brought the real test of his skills. 300 head of cattle needed moving from the high summer pastures before the weather turned. It was a job that typically required 3 or 4 men. "We'll have to do it in stages," Abigail said, studying the terrain from horseback. "Bring them down in groups of 50 or so." "I have another idea," Nathaniel said. "Evie's been riding since she could walk. She's small, but she knows how to work cattle." Abigail looked skeptical. "She's just a child. Out here, children learn fast or they don't survive." He softened his tone. "I wouldn't suggest it if I didn't think she could handle it. She needs to feel useful, not just tag along." After a long moment, Abigail nodded. "If you think it's safe." When they told Evangeline, her face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really, Papa? I can help with the real work?" "Real work means real responsibility," he warned. "You listen to everything Mrs. Abigail and I say, understand?" "Yes, Papa." They saddled 3 horses, Abigail finding an old youth saddle in the barn that fit Evangeline perfectly. As they rode out, Nathaniel felt a familiar rhythm return to his bones, the creak of leather, the sway of his mount. The vast sky stretched overhead. This was the life he knew, the life he'd tried to build with Martha before fever took her away. The cattle were scattered across a high meadow, grown fat and lazy on summer grass. At Nathaniel's direction, they spread out. He took the left flank, Abigail the right, and Evangeline stayed in the middle as sweep rider. "Remember, sunshine," he called to his daughter. "Steady and calm, the cattle feel what you feel." What followed was a dance as old as the West itself. They moved slowly at first, letting the cattle get used to their presence. Then, with subtle pressure, they began guiding the herd down slope. Evangeline proved her worth quickly, anticipating which animals might break from the group and moving to block them before they could scatter. "She's got good instincts," Abigail commented when they paused to rest the horses. "Her mother's gift," Nathaniel said. "Martha could gentle the wildest horse just by talking to it." They worked through the day, bringing down group after group. By late afternoon, they'd moved over half the herd to the lower pastures. Evangeline had grown quieter as the hours passed, but she never complained, never asked to stop. "That's enough for today," Abigail finally declared. "We'll get the rest tomorrow." As they rode back, Nathaniel noticed his daughter swaying slightly in her saddle. Without a word, he moved his horse closer, ready to catch her if needed. But she straightened, gripping the reins with determined hands. "Did I do good, Papa?" she asked as they unsaddled the horses. "You did better than good. You did professional work today." Abigail appeared with a cup of water. "Professional workers get paid," she said seriously, then pressed a silver dollar into Evangeline's palm. "Fair wages for fair work." Evangeline stared at the coin as if it were magical. My very own dollar? Your very own. You earned it. That night, Evangeline could barely keep her eyes open through supper, but she clutched her dollar tight, occasionally pulling it out to admire it in the lamplight. What will you do with your wages? Abigail asked. Save it, Evangeline said promptly. Papa says saving is important. Smart girl. Though it's also good to buy something special sometimes, something just for you. After Evangeline had been carried to bed, exhausted but happy, Nathaniel found Abigail on the porch, watching the stars emerge. You didn't have to pay her, he said, joining her on the bench. Yes, I did. She worked as hard as any hand I've hired. Harder than some. She paused. Children need to know their worth, especially girls. Too many grow up thinking they're only good for what others give them, not what they earn themselves. Speaking from experience, my father was a good man, but old-fashioned, thought teaching me to read was enough education for any woman. Her smile was rueful. Samuel had to teach me numbers and accounting after we married, said a rancher's wife needed to know the business as well as any man. Sounds like he was ahead of his time. He was ahead of mine, that's certain. She pulled her shawl closer. I fought him on it at first. Thought he was criticizing my father's judgment. Took me time to realize he was trying to make sure I'd never be helpless. Good man. The best. The words came out fierce, protective, then softer. Though he'd have liked your daughter. Always said the ranch needed children's laughter. They sat in comfortable silence, watching bats dart through the darkness. Inside, Nathaniel could see the warm glow of the fire through the window, the home-like comfort of it. How quickly they'd fallen into rhythms together, work and meals, stories and quiet evenings, like a family. Almost, though he didn't dare name it such. The next days brought more of the same. They finished moving the cattle, Evangeline growing more confident with each passing hour. She'd taken to wearing her dollar on a string around her neck, tucked safe beneath her dress but touched often, as if to reassure herself it was real. One afternoon, while Nathaniel repaired harnesses in the barn, he heard laughter from the house, real and delighted laughter from both Abigail and his daughter. He paused in his work, letting the sound wash over him. When was the last time he'd heard Evangeline laugh like that? Not since before Martha took sick, surely. He found them in the kitchen, flour dusting every surface and both their faces. Papa, Evangeline cried, we're making bread. Real bread, not hardtack. I can see that, he said, taking in the chaos. Looks like the flour's winning. Bread is a battle, Abigail said solemnly, a streak of flour across her cheek. Sometimes you win, sometimes the dough does. They showed him how to knead properly. Evangeline's small hands working alongside Abigail's stronger ones. The kitchen filled with warmth and the yeasty smell of rising dough. And for a moment, Nathaniel forgot about loss and wandering and the uncertain future. There was only this, his daughter's joy, Abigail's patient teaching, the simple pleasure of creating something nurturing with their own hands. That evening, as they ate the still warm bread with butter and honey, Evangeline declared it the best she'd ever tasted. Because we made it together, she said matter-of-factly. Things are always better when you make them with people you... She stopped, suddenly shy, glancing between her father and Abigail. With people you care about, Abigail finished gently. Yes, they are. Later, as Nathaniel tucked his daughter into bed, she asked, Papa, are we staying here forever? The question he'd been dreading. I don't know. Sunshine. We're here for now, and that's what matters. I want to stay, she said firmly. Mrs. Abigail needs us, and we need her too, don't we? From the mouths of babes, Nathaniel thought. Sleep now. Tomorrow's another big day. But Evangeline wasn't finished. Papa, do you think Mama would like Mrs. Abigail? His throat tightened. I think she would. Very much. Good. Because I like her too. She doesn't try to be Mama, but she's teaching me things Mama would have wanted me to know. She yawned. That's good, isn't it? That's very good. Sunshine. As he returned to the main room, he found Abigail mending one of Evangeline's dresses, adding length to the hem with careful stitches. She's growing, she said without looking up. Children do that, even when times are hard. Abigail. He stopped, unsure what he wanted to say. Thank you seemed insufficient. The past week had shown him something he'd thought lost forever, the possibility of home, of belonging somewhere again. She looked up then, seeming to read his struggle. I know, she said simply. I feel it too. What do we do about it? We take each day as it comes. Winter's bearing down, and there's work to be done. The rest. She returned to her sewing. The rest will sort itself out or it won't. Practical words, but her hands trembled slightly on the fabric. Nathaniel understood. They were both walking wounded, careful of hoping for too much too soon. But something was building between the three of them, fragile as first ice but growing stronger each day. I'll bring in more firewood, he said, needing action to calm his thoughts. Outside, the stars sprawled across the sky in wild abundance. He could hear the cattle lowing in the near pasture, horses shifting in the barn. His daughter slept safe and warm, her belly full, learning and growing under a good woman's care. He had work that mattered, wages fairly earned, and the respect of someone he'd come to admire more each day. It wasn't the life he'd planned with Martha, but it was a life nonetheless, and for the first time since her death, that felt like enough. When he returned with the wood, Abigail had set aside the mending and was writing in her ledger. She looked up as he entered, and something passed between them. Not a promise, not yet, but an acknowledgement of possibility. Nathaniel, she said, and he realized it was the first time she'd used his given name without the formal Mr. attached. I'm glad you knocked on my door that night. So am I, he replied, meaning it with every fiber of his being. So am I. The morning Pike Morrison arrived started like any other. Frost silvered the grass, and Nathaniel was already in the barn, mucking stalls while Evangeline scattered feed for the chickens. Abigail had just stepped onto the porch with her coffee when she spotted the riders approaching. 3 men, moving with the deliberate pace of those who wanted to be seen coming. Nathaniel, she called, keeping her voice steady despite the unease crawling up her spine. He emerged from the barn, pitchfork in hand, and followed her gaze. His expression darkened. Evie, go inside. But Papa, I haven't finished. Inside, now! Something in his tone made the child obey without further protest. She scurried past Abigail, who touched her shoulder reassuringly before the door closed. The riders stopped just outside the fence. The man in front was big, with pale eyes and a scar that pulled his mouth into a permanent sneer. His companions looked like hired muscle, the kind who enjoyed their work too much. Mrs. Thornfield, the scarred man said, touching his hat in a mockery of politeness. Pike Morrison, representing Mr. Cyrus Hartwell's interests. I know who you are. Abigail replied. State your business. Morrison's gaze slid to Nathaniel, who'd moved to stand beside her. Hired yourself a new hand, I see, bit soon after your husband's passing, isn't it? My employment arrangements are none of your concern, Abigail said coldly. Everything on this range is Mr. Hartwell's concern. Morrison dismounted, his men following suit, especially when your cattle keep wandering onto his land. Found near a dozen head with your brand grazing his water yesterday. That's impossible. We moved all the cattle to the lower pastures last week. You calling me a liar, Mrs. Thornfield? Nathaniel stepped forward. She's saying you're mistaken. Easy enough to verify. Why don't you show us these strays? Morrison's eyes narrowed. And you are. The hired hand, like the lady said. They studied each other, and Abigail saw something flicker across Morrison's face. Not quite recognition, but a wary assessment. Professional gunmen had a way of recognizing their own kind. Cattle cross property lines. Nathaniel continued calmly. It happens. We'll ride out today. Check the fences. Bring back any strays. No harm done. No harm? Morrison laughed. An ugly sound. Mr. Hartwell's patience is wearing thin. This is the third time this year. He's thinking maybe Mrs. Thornfield can't manage a ranch this size. Thinking maybe she'd be better off selling to someone who can... I'm not selling, Abigail said firmly. Not yet. Morrison's smile was all teeth. But winter's coming. Accidents happen. Cattle die. Barns burn. Terrible dangerous. Ranching alone. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Nathaniel's hand had drifted closer to his hip, though he wore no gun. That sounds like a threat, Mr. Morrison, Abigail said. Just observing the hazards of frontier life. Ma'am, Mr. Hartwell would hate to see anything happen to such a vulnerable operation. His gaze lingered on the house, where Evangeline's face appeared briefly at the window. Especially with a child about. Dangerous country for little ones. Nathaniel went very still. When he spoke, his voice had dropped to something soft and lethal. You're right, it is dangerous country. Men disappear out here all the time, fall off their horses in the dark, get lost in snowstorms. Sometimes they threaten the wrong people and just vanish. Morrison's hand moved toward his gun, but stopped when Nathaniel smiled. Course, you're just here about cattle. Neighborly concern. We appreciate that. Nathaniel's tone had returned to pleasant, but his eyes remained cold. Tell Mr. Hartwell we'll check our fences today. Any strays will be returned promptly. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Morrison stepped back, something like respect flickering in his pale eyes. See that they are. Mr. Hartwell's generosity has limits. They mounted and rode off. But Morrison turned back once, his gaze finding Nathaniel. You look familiar, friend. We met before. Doubt it. I'm just a drifter working for wages. Funny, you don't sit a horse like a drifter. Morrison wheeled his mount around. Be seeing you. After they'd gone, Abigail realized she was shaking. Nathaniel gently took her elbow and guided her inside, where Evangeline waited anxiously. Who are those men, Papa? Nobody important. Sunshine. Why don't you go check on the kittens? When she'd gone, Abigail sank into a chair. He threatened Evangeline. He threatened all of us. Nathaniel poured her coffee with steady hands, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Tell me about Hartwell. Cyrus Hartwell owns the biggest spread in the territory. 3,000 head, maybe more. He's been buying up smaller ranches for years, by whatever means necessary. She wrapped her hands around the warm cup. Samuel always said Hartwell had his eye on our water rights. We've got the best year-round stream for miles. And now, with Samuel gone, he figures you're easy pickings. I've had offers, generous ones. Or so they seemed. When I refused, she gestured toward the door. The visit started. Little things at first. Cut fences, scattered cattle. Nothing I could prove. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. Morrison recognized something in me. He's not wrong. I wasn't always a rancher. Abigail waited, sensing the weight of what he was about to share. I was a lawman once, deputy marshal in Kansas, before Evangeline was born. Good at it, too, maybe too good. He stared into his coffee. Made enemies. One of them came for me at home. Martha was... He stopped, swallowed hard. She was alone with the baby. Got between them and the gun. By the time I got there... Oh, Nathaniel. I killed him. The man who shot her. Killed him and felt nothing but empty. Turned in my badge the next day. Took Evangeline and left. Been running ever since, I suppose, running from what I was, what I did. Abigail reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. You protected your family. There's no shame in that. Didn't protect them well enough. He turned his hand palm up, interlacing their fingers. But I won't make that mistake again. If Hartwell wants this ranch, he'll have to go through me. This isn't your fight, isn't it? He squeezed her hand gently. Evie hasn't smiled in months before we came here. She's learning, growing, being a child again. You did that. You gave her back something I couldn't. You think I'll let anyone threaten that? They sat in silence, hands clasped across the table. Finally, Abigail spoke. What do we do? First, we check those fences like I promised. Then we prepare. Hartwell's type doesn't give up easy, but they're also careful. He'll probe for weakness before he commits to real violence. Nathaniel's smile was grim. Lucky for us. I know how men like him think. They spent the day riding the property lines. As Nathaniel suspected, the fences were intact. No sign of tampering. But they found tracks. Horsemen who'd driven a small group of cattle across the boundary, then back again, leaving just enough evidence to support Morrison's claim. Clever, Nathaniel admitted. Make it look like negligence on our part. Samuel always said Hartwell was patient as a spider. They repaired a few weak spots in the fence, more to show they'd taken the complaint seriously than from real need. As they worked, Nathaniel found himself watching Abigail, the competent way she handled tools and horse alike. She'd grown into this life, shaped by its demands but not broken by them. That evening, as Evangeline played with the kittens in the barn, Nathaniel cleaned his rifle and the old Colt he'd found in the barn, still in working order. Abigail watched from the doorway. "I hate this," she said quietly. "The fear, the waiting for something bad to happen. Samuel tried to shield me from it, but I always knew it was there. It's the way of things out here. The strong take from the weak, unless the weak get smart or lucky or both." "Which are we?" He looked up at her, backlit by the setting sun. "We're not weak, not anymore." That night, Nathaniel moved his bedroll to the main room, positioning himself between the door and the hallway leading to the bedrooms. If trouble came calling, it would find him first. Evangeline, sensing the tension despite their efforts to hide it, was reluctant to go to bed. "Papa, are the bad men coming back?" "Maybe, but you don't need to worry about that." "Why not?" He smoothed her hair back from her face. "Because that's my job. Your job is to sleep tight and have good dreams." "Will you protect Mrs. Abigail too?" "I'll protect everyone in this house." She considered this. "Good, because I think she's our family now." "Isn't she?" Nathaniel's throat tightened. From the hallway, he heard Abigail's quick intake of breath. "What makes you say that? Sunshine? She takes care of us. We take care of her. That's what families do." Evangeline yawned. "Mama would understand. She always said hearts got bigger with more people to love, not smaller." After she'd fallen asleep, Nathaniel found Abigail standing by the window, tears tracking silent down her cheeks. "She's right, you know," Abigail whispered. "Somewhere between that first night and now, you both became essential." "Abigail, no. Let me say this. I've been so afraid of dishonoring Samuel's memory by moving on, but I think he'd hate seeing me alone more than anything else. He always said I had too much love for just one person anyway." Nathaniel crossed to her, cupping her face gently, thumbing away the tears. "We're a matched set, you and I, both trying to figure out how to live again after loss. Maybe we can figure it out together. Even with Hartwell and his threats? Especially with that. Nothing worth having comes easy out here." She leaned into his touch. "Promise me something. Whatever happens, we protect Evangeline first. She's innocent in all this. I promise, but I'm going to protect you both, or die trying." "Don't you dare die," she said fiercely. "Don't you dare leave us now that we've found you." He pulled her close, and she came willingly, fitting against him like she belonged there. They stood together in the darkness, drawing strength from each other while outside the wind rose, carrying with it the scent of coming snow and the promise of harder days ahead. But for now, they were together. A makeshift family forged from loss and need, and the stubborn hope that refused to die even in the hardest ground. Whatever Hartwell sent their way, they'd face it together. In the barn, a kitten mewed. In her bed, Evangeline smiled in her sleep. And in the main room, two wounded souls held each other and began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd found their way home. The morning dawned crisp and clear, perfect for what Nathaniel had in mind. 3 days had passed since Morrison's visit, 3 days of watching and waiting. But today, they would take action of a different sort. "We're going after the strays that wandered up canyon," he announced at breakfast. "All of us." Evangeline's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Me too." Can't leave you here alone, and we need all hands for this job." Abigail understood immediately. Keeping Evangeline close was safer than leaving her at the ranch, even for a few hours. "I'll pack provisions. It'll be a long day." They set out after the morning chores. 3 riders against the vast landscape. Evangeline rode between them on her gentle mare, her small frame straight with pride and purpose. She'd taken to wearing her hair in braids like Abigail, and Nathaniel's heart caught at how naturally she'd begun to mirror the woman who'd shown her such kindness. The canyon country stretched before them, red rock and scattered juniper, paths that wound between ancient stones. The cattle had indeed wandered far, following water and sweet grass into a box canyon miles from home. "There," Abigail pointed to fresh tracks. "Maybe a dozen head." They followed the trail deeper into the canyon, the walls rising around them like cathedral spires. It was beautiful country, but treacherous. Too many places for ambush. Too many ways to get lost. "Stay close, sunshine," Nathaniel warned as Evangeline's mare tried to wander toward an interesting patch of flowers. They found the cattle near a spring, grazing peacefully in a hidden meadow. The brands were mixed, some theirs, some bearing Hartwell's H-bar mark. "Well, now," Nathaniel said quietly, "seems our cattle aren't the only ones who wander. Or someone wanted them to wander together." Abigail observed, "Make it look like we're stealing." They separated the herds carefully, working in the practiced rhythm they'd developed. Evangeline proved her worth again, keeping the scattered animals from bolting while the adults cut out the different brands. It was near noon when they stopped to rest the horses and eat. They made camp by the spring, spreading a blanket in the shade of an overhanging rock. The canyon walls sheltered them from the wind, creating a pocket of warmth in the cool day. "Tell me a story, Mrs. Abigail," Evangeline requested through a mouthful of biscuit. "About when you were little." Abigail smiled. "When I was your age, my family lived in Ohio. Flat country, not like here. I used to dream about mountains and adventures." "Is that why you came west?" "Partly, but mostly I came because that's where life led me." She glanced at Nathaniel. Sometimes the best things happen when we're not looking for them. As Abigail spun tales of her childhood, Nathaniel found himself watching them both, his daughter hanging on every word. Abigail's face animated with memory and humor. The sun filtered through the rocks, casting patterns of light and shadow. And, for a moment, the threats and worries seemed very far away. "Papa's not listening," Evangeline accused, noticing his distraction. "I'm listening," he protested. "Just thinking too." "About what?" "About how lucky we are to be here, right now, together." Evangeline considered this with the seriousness only a child could muster. "Mama used to say that too. She said we should hold tight to the good moments because they help us through the bad ones." "Your mama was a wise woman," Abigail said softly. "She would have liked you." Evangeline declared, "You both know about important things." After lunch, they began moving the cattle back toward home. It was slower going with animals than without, and the afternoon shadows were lengthening by the time they reached more familiar ground. That's when Nathaniel spotted the dust cloud. "Company," he said quietly to Abigail. "Take Evie and the cattle into that draw. Stay out of sight. Nathaniel, please, just until I know who it is." She didn't argue further, recognizing the tone that brooked no discussion. "Come on, sweet pea," she told Evangeline. "Let's water the horses while your papa scouts ahead." Nathaniel rode to higher ground, using a stand of pines for cover. The riders came into view, 5 men, moving fast. Not Hartwell's men, he realized with relief, but neighbors from the surrounding ranches. He recognized Tom Patterson in the lead, a solid man who'd always dealt fair with Samuel. He showed himself, and Patterson raised a hand in greeting. "Blackwood, we were riding out to your place. Glad we found you. What's the trouble?" "Wire fence." Patterson's face was grim. "Someone strung barbed wire across Miller's Creek, right where it crosses the old cattle trail. Jim Hendrick's boy nearly killed his horse running into it in the dark last night." Nathaniel swore under his breath. Barbed wire was a fighting matter in open range country. Hartwell? Has to be. Nobody else would dare. He's trying to close off access to water, force us all to sell or move on. Patterson looked around. Where's Mrs. Thornfield? Safe. We were gathering strays. Nathaniel whistled. The signal for all clear. Abigail emerged from the draw, driving the small herd with Evangeline's help. The men touched their hats respectfully. Ma'am, sorry to bring trouble, but this affects us all. What affects one affects all, Abigail agreed. That's always been the way out here. They made camp together as darkness fell, the men agreeing it was too late to make town before full dark. The cattle were secured in a rope corral, and soon the smell of coffee and beans filled the air. Evangeline, thrilled by the novelty of so many visitors, helped serve supper with careful hands. The men, rough as they were, showed remarkable gentleness with the child, accepting their portions with grave thanks and complimenting her on her serving skills. Your girl's a natural rancher, Patterson told Nathaniel. Saw her working those cattle earlier. Reminded me of my own daughter at that age. Around the campfire, they discussed the wire fence problem. It was more than just Hartwell's usual harassment. It was a declaration of war against the open-range tradition. We could cut it, one man suggested. Done it before when folks got too grabby. Well, and have the law on us. Another countered. Hartwell's probably counting on that. What we need, Nathaniel said slowly, is to make it more trouble than it's worth. Hartwell's a businessman. Hit his pocket, and he'll think twice. How? Unity. We work together, share resources, support each other. Make it clear that pushing one of us means fighting all of us. He looked around the fire. How many small ranchers between here and town? Maybe 15, 20 if you count the real small operations. That's enough to make a statement. Organize, pool resources for supplies, so Hartwell can't squeeze anyone out through the merchants he controls. Share water rights legally, with proper documentation. Make it impossible for him to pick us off one by one. Patterson nodded slowly. Could work, but it'll take trust. Not everyone gets along out here. They'll get along better than they'll like being forced off their land, Abigail said firmly. Samuel always said the small ranchers needed to band together. Maybe it's time. The talk went on late into the night. Evangeline fell asleep against Abigail's shoulder, and Nathaniel watched as she adjusted the child more comfortably, covering her with a blanket without waking her. The gesture was so naturally maternal, it made his chest tight. You've done well for yourself, Blackwood, Patterson observed quietly. The widow Thornfield is a fine woman, and your girl clearly adores her. We're not, that is, I work for her. Patterson's smile was knowing. Sure you do. And I'm the Queen of England. He grew serious. Don't wait too long, friend. Good things don't last out here without someone fighting to keep them. One by one, the men rolled into their blankets, leaving Nathaniel on watch. Abigail stayed up with him, Evangeline still sleeping against her. We should move her to her bedroll, he said softly. Let her be. She's comfortable. Abigail stroked the child's hair absently. She was brave today. You've raised her well. I've just tried to keep her alive and safe. You've taught her how to live. They sat quietly, listening to the night sounds, the distant yip of coyotes, the rustle of wind through grass, the occasional stamp and blow from the horses. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows on the canyon walls. What you said about unity, Abigail murmured. It could work, but Hartwell won't take it lying down. No, he won't. Things will likely get worse before they get better. I'm not afraid. Not anymore. She looked at him across the dying fire. Having something worth fighting for makes all the difference. Yes, he agreed, his eyes never leaving hers. It does. Evangeline stirred, mumbling something about angels and horses. Abigail soothed her back to sleep with gentle touches and whispered reassurances, watching them. Nathaniel felt that now familiar ache of possibility, of a future he'd thought lost forever. In the morning, they'd return to the ranch and begin organizing the resistance to Hartwell's ambitions. There would be danger and hardship, no doubt. But tonight, under the vast canopy of stars, with his daughter safe in Abigail's arms and good men ready to stand together, Nathaniel allowed himself to hope. The fire crackled, sending sparks spiraling upward like prayers. Somewhere in the darkness, a night bird called, and its mate answered. The sound echoed off the canyon walls, a reminder that even in the wildest places, no one had to be alone. Should wake Patterson for his watch, Nathaniel said eventually. In a minute, Abigail replied, her hand still gentle on Evangeline's hair. Let's just be here for another minute. So they sat together in the firelight, a makeshift family bound by loss and hope and the fierce determination to protect what they'd found in each other. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. But tonight, they had this, the warmth of the fire, the safety of numbers, and the quiet certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it together. The smell of smoke woke Nathaniel from a dead sleep. For a moment, he lay still, trying to place the scent, not the comfortable smell of a hearth fire, but something sharper. Wrong. Then he heard it, the terrified bellowing of cattle and the crackle of burning wood. Fire! He was on his feet, pulling on his boots. Abigail, the barn's on fire! She emerged from her room already dressed, her face pale but determined. Evangeline. I'll get her. You start on the water buckets. But Evangeline was already up, clutching her doll, eyes wide with fear. Papa, what's happening? Stay with Mrs. Abigail. Sunshine. Do exactly what she says. He grabbed his coat and rifle. No matter what, you stay with her. Outside, the night was alive with orange light. The barn's west wall was engulfed, flames licking hungrily at the dry wood. The horses screamed in terror, and Nathaniel could hear the cattle in the nearby corral pressing against the fences, desperate to escape. The horses first! Abigail shouted over the roar. She'd already started a bucket line from the pump, though they both knew it was futile against a fire this size. Nathaniel plunged into the smoke-filled barn. The heat hit him like a physical blow, but he pushed forward. Throwing open stall doors, the horses needed no encouragement. They bolted for safety the moment they were free. He counted as they ran. 1, 2, 3. Where was the fourth? Through the smoke, he saw her, Evangeline's gentle mare, pressed against the back wall, too terrified to move. He grabbed a blanket, threw it over her head, and let her out, coughing and stumbling through the thickening smoke. Papa! Evangeline's scream cut through the chaos. She broke free from Abigail and ran toward him. Buttercup! She's safe, baby. She's safe. He passed the mare's lead to his daughter, then turned back to the disaster. The fire had spread to the roof now, sending burning debris raining down. There was no saving the barn, but if they could keep it from spreading to the house. The cattle! Abigail pointed to the corral. The press of frightened animals had broken through one section of fence, and cattle were scattering in all directions, some running toward the flames in their panic. Together, they worked to direct the stampeding animals away from the fire. It was dangerous work. 300 pounds of frightened beef didn't care what stood in its way. More than once, Nathaniel had to pull Abigail out of the path of charging cattle. By the time they'd gotten the herd moving away from the buildings, the barn was beyond hope. They stood watching it burn, covered in soot and sweat, breathing hard. Evangeline pressed against Nathaniel's side, tears cutting clean tracks through the dirt on her face. My kittens, she whispered. The kittens were in there. Abigail knelt beside her, pulling her close. I'm so sorry. Sweet Pea, I'm so sorry. As dawn broke, the full extent of the damage became clear. The barn was a total loss, along with most of their winter feed, tools, and tack. Several cattle had been injured in the stampede, and they'd lost at least a dozen head who'd scattered into the darkness. Nathaniel walked the perimeter, reading the signs. He found what he expected. Hoof prints leading away, the stub of a torch thrown carelessly aside. This was no accident. Hartwell's men? Abigail asked, joining him. Without doubt. He showed her the torch. They wanted us to know it, too. This is what happens when you don't fall in line. Her jaw tightened. Then we rebuild. Better and stronger. With what? Winter's coming. Abigail. Without shelter for the animals. Without feed. He didn't need to finish. They both knew what it meant. We'll find a way. But her voice lacked conviction. The loss was devastating, possibly fatal to the ranch's survival. They spent the morning salvaging what they could. Neighbors began arriving by midday, drawn by the smoke still rising from the ruins. Tom Patterson was among the first, his face grim as he surveyed the damage. "This changes things," he said. "Burning out a widow and child. Even Hartwell's crossed a line. What good does that do us?" Abigail asked bitterly. "My barn's still ash, my cattle still scattered." "It means you're not facing this alone," Patterson replied. He turned to address the growing crowd. "If they'll burn out the Thornfield place, none of us are safe. I say it's time we stopped talking and started acting." A murmur of agreement ran through the gathered ranchers. These were people who'd faced drought and blizzards, Indians and outlaws. They understood survival meant standing together. "My boys and I will help round up your scattered cattle," one man offered. "I've got extra feed stored," another added. "Not enough for the whole winter, but it'll help." "We can raise a new barn," Patterson declared. "All of us together. Make it clear to Hartwell that burning one of us out just makes the rest stronger." Abigail's eyes filled with tears, the first she'd shed since the fire. Thank you. All of you." As the men organized search parties for the cattle, Nathaniel noticed Evangeline sitting alone by the ruins, still clutching her doll. He sat beside her, pulling her onto his lap. "I know it hurts. Sunshine. Losing the kittens." "It's not fair," she said, her small voice fierce. "They were just babies. They never hurt anyone." "No, it's not fair. Bad people sometimes hurt innocent things to make a point. Will they come back? Will they burn our house too?" Nathaniel's arms tightened around her. "Not if I can help it. You can't stay awake forever. Papa, even you need to sleep sometimes." The simple truth of it hit him hard. She was right. One man couldn't protect them indefinitely. But maybe one man didn't have to. That evening, as the sun set over the blackened ruins, something remarkable happened. Wagons began arriving from neighboring ranches, loaded with lumber and supplies. Women brought food. Men brought tools and willing hands. By nightfall, the yard looked like a small tent city. "We'll start at first light," Patterson announced. "Frame first, then walls. If we work together, we can have her raised in 2 days." Abigail stood before them all, struggling for words. "I don't know how to thank you all." "No thanks needed," an older woman said firmly. "Today it's your barn. Tomorrow it could be any of ours. That's how we survive out here, together or not at all." As the gathering settled in for the night, Nathaniel found himself on watch again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Men took shifts, keeping guard while others slept. The message to Hartwell was clear. The small ranchers would no longer be picked off one by one. Abigail joined him by the dying fire, bringing coffee. "I've never seen anything like this. All these people coming together. It's what Samuel would have wanted, what he was working toward." She was quiet for a moment. "He would have liked you, respected what you're doing here. I'm just trying to keep us safe." "No, it's more than that. You've given them hope, shown them they can fight back." She paused, then added softly, "You've given me hope too." Before he could respond, a shout went up from one of the watchers. Riders approaching. Nathaniel was on his feet instantly, rifle ready. But as they came into the firelight, he saw they weren't Hartwell's men. It was Marshal Brennan from town, accompanied by 2 deputies. The lawman's weathered face was unreadable as he surveyed the scene. The burned barn, the assembled ranchers, the armed guards. "Mrs. Thornfield," he touched his hat. "Heard you had some trouble. Our barn was burned. Marshal, deliberately." "That's a serious accusation. You have proof?" Nathaniel stepped forward. "Torch stubs, Track leading away. Pretty clear what happened. Brennan studied him. You're the new hand. Blackwood, isn't it? Heard you used to wear a badge yourself. Used to. Now I just work cattle. The marshal dismounted, his deputies following suit. Well, I'll need to investigate. Can't have folks taking the law into their own hands. Burning property. Goes both ways. That rule. The implied warning was clear. Stay within the law, or face the consequences. But there was something else in Brennan's manner. A careful neutrality that suggested he wasn't entirely in Hartwell's pocket. We're just rebuilding a barn. Marshal, Patterson said. Nothing illegal about neighbors helping neighbors. No, nothing illegal about that. Brennan walked through the crowd, making his presence known. Just remember, all of you, I'll enforce the law equally. That means no vigilante justice, no matter how righteous you feel. Are we clear? A chorus of agreement rose from the assembled ranchers. They understood the game. Stay legal. Give Brennan no excuse to act against them. As the marshal prepared to leave, he paused near Nathaniel. Heard you were good with a gun, back in Kansas. I was good at keeping the peace, Nathaniel corrected. Still am. See that you remember the peace part. Brennan's voice dropped. Hartwell's got deep pockets and a long reach, but he's not the only power in this territory. Push comes to shove. The law has to mean something, or we're all just animals. After the marshal left, the mood was subdued but determined. The battle lines were drawn now, clear for all to see. Tomorrow they'd raise a barn, not just to replace what was lost, but as a statement of defiance. Evangeline had finally fallen asleep in Abigail's bed, worn out by fear and grief. Nathaniel checked on her, smoothing her hair gently. In sleep. She looked even younger, more vulnerable. We'll protect her, Abigail said from the doorway. All of us will. She's already lost so much. If anything happened to her, nothing will, not while I draw breath. The fierceness in her voice surprised them both. She's become like my own. Nathaniel, I hope that doesn't overstep. He turned to her, seeing the uncertainty in her eyes. You could never overstep. You've given her what I couldn't, a mother's love. I see it every day, in 1,000 small ways. And you've given me purpose again, a reason to fight for this place beyond mere stubbornness. She stepped closer. Whatever comes next, we face it as a family, the three of us. He kissed her then, soft and certain. A promise sealed not with words, but with the simple pressure of lips and the sharing of breath. When they parted, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. We'll rebuild, she whispered. The barn, the herd, all of it. And Hartwell will learn that some things can't be burned away. Outside, the guards kept watch, and the assembled neighbors slept under stars, ready to rise with the dawn and build something stronger from the ashes. The war for the range had begun in earnest, but for the first time, the small ranchers had hope, and in the house, a makeshift family held close to each other, drawing strength from their bond and the knowledge that tomorrow they would not stand alone. The new barn stood proud against the evening sky, its fresh-cut timber glowing golden in the last light. It had taken 3 days of communal effort, but the structure was even finer than the original. As the helpers departed, each family promised to keep watch on certain nights, creating a network of protection across the valley. 2 weeks passed in relative quiet. The cattle were recovered, the winter feed secured, and life settled into watchful routine. But Nathaniel knew it couldn't last. Hartwell had been too quiet, and in his experience, dangerous men were never more deadly than when they were planning. The trap came on a moonless night in late October. Nathaniel woke to the sound of horses, too many and moving too carefully to be friendly. He slipped from his bedroll in the main room, checked the loads in his rifle and pistol, then moved to wake Abigail. They're here, he whispered. Get Evangeline to the root cellar. She was alert instantly, frontier trained. No questions, no panic, just swift action. While she roused Evangeline, Nathaniel positioned himself by the window. He counted at least 8 riders, spreading out to surround the house. Thornfield, Pike Morrison's voice carried across the yard. "We know you're in there. Come out peaceful-like, and nobody gets hurt." Nathaniel called back. "State your business, Morrison." "Got a warrant here, says you've been stealing Hartwell cattle. Marshal wants you brought in for questioning." "In the middle of the night? With 8 men? Try again." A laugh from outside. "Well now, can't blame a man for trying the easy way first. Here's how it is. You come out, or we come in. Either way, you're leaving that house." Abigail appeared at his shoulder. "Evangeline's safe. What's the plan?" "They want me, not you. I go out, draw them off." "Absolutely not." Her voice was steel. "We stand together." Before he could argue, new sounds reached them. More horses, coming fast. Morrison's men heard it too, shifting restlessly. Then Tom Patterson's voice boomed across the yard. "Evening, Pike. Bit late for a social call, isn't it?" Nathaniel peered out to see at least a dozen riders, neighbors who'd responded to some prearranged signal. Marshal Brennan was with them, his badge glinting in the lamplight. "This is legal business, Patterson." Morrison growled. "No concern of yours." "See, that's where you're wrong." Patterson replied easily. "Mrs. Thornfield's our neighbor. That makes it our concern. Now, I believe the marshal here wants a word about that warrant you mentioned." Brennan urged his horse forward. "Like to see that paper. Pike, don't have it on me. It's back in town. Funny thing, that, since I'm the only one who can issue warrants in this jurisdiction, and I don't recall signing any." The marshal's voice hardened. "Seems to me you're trespassing on private property, making threats, disturbing the peace. That's jail time. Pike." The tension stretched taut. Morrison's men looked to their leader, hands drifting toward weapons. The neighbors matched their movements. One wrong move would turn the yard into a battleground. "Mr. Hartwell won't like this," Morrison said finally. "Mr. Hartwell can take it up with the law." Brennan replied, "Now move along, all of you, and Pike, next time you want to serve a warrant, make sure you actually have one." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Morrison wheeled his horse around. "This isn't over. Blackwood, not by a long shot." They rode off into the darkness, but everyone knew they'd be back. The neighbors stayed until dawn, setting up a defensive perimeter. Marshal Brennan lingered, accepting coffee from Abigail. "Can't always be here," he said quietly. "And Hartwell's got influence in the territorial government. Sooner or later, he'll find a legal way to move against you. Then we'll face it when it comes." Nathaniel said, "There might be another way." Brennan studied his coffee. "Hartwell's careful, but he's not perfect. Man like that builds his empire on threats and violence, leaves tracks, evidence, the kind that could interest federal marshals, maybe even the territorial governor." Abigail leaned forward. "What kind of evidence?" "The kind that needs collecting by someone who knows how, someone with experience in such matters." His eyes met Nathaniel's meaningfully. "I'm just a ranch hand." "Sure you are. And I'm just a small-town sheriff who doesn't notice when 8 armed men try to kidnap a citizen." Brennan stood. "Think about it, Blackwood. Sometimes the best way to end a war is to win it quick and legal." After he left, Nathaniel found Abigail watching him with knowing eyes. "He's right. We can't just react forever. It's dangerous. If I start investigating Hartwell actively, more dangerous than waiting for the next attack? At least this way, we're taking the fight to him." Evangeline appeared in the doorway, hair mussed from sleep. "Are the bad men gone?" "For now, sunshine." Nathaniel lifted her into his arms. "But Mrs. Abigail and I were just discussing how to make sure they don't come back." "Good," she said firmly, "because I don't want to hide in the cellar anymore. It's dark and smells like turnips." Despite everything, they laughed. Trust a child to cut through to the heart of things. Over the next days, they developed their plan. Using his old lawman contacts, Nathaniel began gathering information about Hartwell's operations. Patterson and the other ranchers provided cover, creating distractions and alibis when needed. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jake Martinez, a former Hartwell employee, approached them at the general store. He was nervous, constantly checking over his shoulder. "Heard you're standing up to the old man," he said quietly. "About time someone did." "Why tell us?" Abigail asked. "Because he had my brother killed. Said it was a riding accident. But I know better. Miguel was about to testify about Hartwell's land fraud schemes." He pulled out a worn notebook. "Miguel kept records, dates, names, amounts, how Hartwell would force out small holders, then file false claims on their land." Nathaniel examined the notebook. It was damning, if it could be verified. "Why didn't you take this to the law before? You think Morrison's the only one on Hartwell's payroll, but Marshall Brennan, he's different, and now with all you folks standing together." Martinez shrugged. "Maybe now someone will listen." They arranged to meet Martinez again in 2 nights to get more details, but when the time came, he didn't show. They found his body the next morning, at the bottom of Widow's Canyon. Another accident. He knew the risk. Nathaniel said grimly. "Died trying to do right. Then we can't let it be for nothing." Abigail replied. The notebook, hidden in Abigail's flower bin, became the center of their investigation. Nathaniel verified entries, tracked down witnesses, built a case that would stand up in court, all while maintaining the pretense of simple ranch work. The attack, when it came, was swift and brutal. Nathaniel was in the barn when he heard Evangeline scream. He ran for the house to find Pike Morrison holding his daughter, a knife pressed to her throat. 2 men held Abigail between them. "Evening, Blackwood," Morrison said pleasantly. "Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get that notebook and any other evidence you've collected. Then you're all going to take a little ride." "Let them go," Nathaniel said, his voice deadly calm. "Your issue is with me. See, that's where you're wrong. You all know too much now." Morrison's grip tightened on Evangeline, who whimpered. "The notebook, now." Nathaniel's mind raced, calculating angles and odds. Then he heard it, horses approaching fast. But Morrison heard it too. "Sounds like we're running out of time," he said. "The notebook, or I start cutting." "It's in the house, kitchen cupboard, behind the dishes." "Get it," Morrison ordered one of his men. The rider returned quickly with the notebook. Morrison flipped through it, satisfied. "Good. Now we—" The barn door exploded inward. Tom Patterson and Marshall Brennan burst in, guns drawn, followed by a dozen armed neighbors. In the confusion, Nathaniel moved. He struck like lightning, his fist connecting with Morrison's knife hand. The blade went flying as Evangeline twisted free, running to Abigail. Morrison went for his gun, but Nathaniel was faster. The 2 men grappled, crashing into the wall. Morrison was bigger, but Nathaniel fought with the fury of a father protecting his family. They rolled across the floor, each trying to gain advantage. A shot rang out. Morrison jerked, his eyes widening in surprise. He looked down at the spreading red stain on his shirt, then at Nathaniel, who held the smoking pistol. You shot me," Morrison gasped. "You threatened my daughter," Nathaniel replied coldly. Morrison fell to his knees, then forward. He was dead before he hit the ground. The barn erupted in shouting and movement. Morrison's men, seeing their leader fall and facing overwhelming odds, threw down their weapons. Marshall Brennan took charge, arresting the survivors. "Self-defense," he declared loudly. Everyone here saw it. Man was holding a knife to a child's throat. But there was more drama to come. One of Morrison's men, seeking leniency, began talking. It was all Hartwell's doing, the burnings, the threats. Even Martinez Hartwell ordered it all. "Will you testify to that?" Brennan asked. The man nodded frantically. "Just keep me alive long enough to do it." Nathaniel knelt beside Evangeline and Abigail, gathering them close. They were shaking but unharmed. "It's over," he whispered. "You're safe now." Is he dead?" Evangeline asked, not looking at Morrison's body. "Yes, Sunshine, he can't hurt anyone anymore. Good, she said fiercely, then burst into tears. As the marshal's men cleaned up the scene, Brennan approached Nathaniel. That notebook Martinez died for. We'll need it for evidence. It's all yours. Nathaniel handed it over. Enough there to put Hartwell away. With witness testimony? More than enough. Federal marshals will be very interested in this. Brennan paused. You did good. Blackwood, your lawman instinct saved lives today. I'm no lawman, just a rancher protecting his family. Brennan smiled. If you say so, but if you ever want that badge back. Thanks, but no. I've found where I belong. As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of victory and relief, the three of them stood together. The immediate threat was over. Hartwell would face justice, his empire of fear crumbling. The small ranchers had won their freedom to live and work in peace. What happens now? Abigail asked. Now? Nathaniel pulled them closer. Now we live. We raise cattle and children. We build something good on this land. Together? Evangeline asked hopefully. Together, he confirmed, meeting Abigail's eyes over their daughter's head. Because that's what she was now, their daughter. Just as surely as they were a family. The war was over. The healing could begin. Spring came early to the Montana Territory that year, painting the valleys with wildflowers and filling the air with the sound of rushing snowmelt. The ranch had never looked better. New fences stretched straight and true. The barn stood solid against the sky, and the cattle grew fat on fresh grass. But the most remarkable transformation was in the house itself, where laughter had become as common as morning coffee. 6 months had passed since Pike Morrison's death and Cyrus Hartwell's arrest. The federal marshals had come, taken testimony, and hauled the land baron away to face justice. His empire had crumbled quickly after that. His ill-gotten holdings returned to their rightful owners or sold at fair prices to those who'd worked the land honestly. On this particular morning, Abigail stood on the porch, watching Nathaniel teach Evangeline to rope a fence post. The girl's technique was improving daily, her small hands growing sure with the lariat. Like this, Papa, she called, sending the loop sailing through the air. Perfect. Sunshine. You'll be out roping me before summer's end. I want to rope a real calf next time. When you're ready, he promised. All things in their time. Abigail smiled at the phrase. It had become something of a family motto these past months. All things in their time. They'd learn not to rush healing or happiness, but to let both grow naturally, like crops in good soil. Letter came. Tom Patterson called, riding up to the gate. From town. Nathaniel retrieved the envelope, frowning at the official seal. Such letters rarely brought good news, but as he read, his expression shifted to surprise, then something close to wonder. What is it? Abigail asked, joining him. The territorial judge. He's awarded us restitution from Hartwell's assets. For the barn, the harassment, the attempted... He paused, glancing at Evangeline. For everything, it's enough to secure the ranch for years to come. Abigail took the letter with trembling hands. The amount was more than generous. It was life-changing. We could expand, hire proper hands, build a real future here. We could, Nathaniel agreed. Then, more quietly, we could do a lot of things. That evening, after Evangeline had gone to bed, they sat together on the porch, planning. The money opened possibilities they'd never dared consider. Better breeding stock, improved water systems, even a school for the valley's children. Samuel always dreamed of this, Abigail said softly. Making the ranch into something that would last generations. He'd be proud of what you've built. What we've built, she corrected. I couldn't have survived without you, either of you. Nathaniel took her hand. There's something I've been meaning to ask. Something I should have asked months ago. But I wanted to be sure we were past the danger first. She turned to him, heart suddenly racing. Nathaniel, marry me, Abigail. Not because we need to for propriety or protection, but because I love you. Because Evangeline loves you. Because we're already a family in every way that matters. And I want to make it official before God and man. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Are you sure? I'm not. I can't give you children of your own. You've already given me everything. You brought my daughter back to life. You gave us both a home and a purpose. You taught us that hearts can heal and love can grow even in the hardest ground." He cupped her face gently. "You are all I want. Abigail Thornfield. All we want." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course, yes." They were married on a brilliant May morning, with the whole valley in attendance. Evangeline served as flower girl, scattering wildflower petals with grave concentration. She wore a new blue dress that Abigail had sewn, complete with matching ribbons for her carefully braided hair. "Do I look pretty, Mama Abigail?" she'd asked that morning, the new title slipping out naturally. "You look beautiful, sweet pea, like an angel." "Good, because angels should look nice at weddings." The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, conducted by the circuit preacher under the big cottonwood tree. When Nathaniel kissed his bride, the assembled crowd cheered loud enough to startle the cattle in the near pasture. Tom Patterson, serving as best man, clapped Nathaniel on the shoulder. "About time, friend. We were starting to take bets on when you'd get around to it." The reception lasted well into the evening. Tables groaned under the weight of food brought by neighbors, and the sound of fiddle music drifted across the range. Children ran wild between the dancers, Evangeline leading a pack of them in some complicated game involving the barn cats. As the sun set, Marshal Brennan approached the happy couple. "Wanted to give you the latest news. Hartwell was convicted on all charges. He'll be spending the next 20 years behind bars." "Justice," Abigail said simply. "Indeed. And there's something else." Brennan produced an envelope. "This came through official channels. Seems the territorial government is looking for honest folk to serve as local magistrates. People who understand both law and community. Interested? Blackwood?" Nathaniel looked at his new wife, then at Evangeline, who'd run up to show them a captured firefly. "Thanks, Marshal, but no. I've got everything I need right here. Let someone else wear the badge. I'm content being a rancher and family man." Brennan smiled. "Fair enough. Offer stands if you change your mind." As the celebration continued around them, the new family found a quiet moment together. Evangeline sat between them on the porch steps, drowsy from the day's excitement. "Are we a real family now?" she asked sleepily. "We've been a real family for a while now," Nathaniel told her. "Today just made it official." "Good, because I told the other kids that Mama Abigail was my real mama now. And Billy Stevens said that wasn't true unless there was a wedding." She yawned. "Now I can tell him he was wrong." Abigail hugged her close. "You can tell him whatever you like, as long as it's true and kind. I'll just tell him I have the best parents in the whole territory. That's true, isn't it?" "The truest thing I know," Nathaniel agreed. As the stars emerged overhead, the party gradually wound down. Neighbors headed home with promises to help with the summer roundup. Children were carried sleeping to wagons, and the newlyweds were left with the quiet satisfaction of a day well lived. Over the following years, the Blackwood Ranch prospered. They hired good men, expanded their holdings honestly, and became pillars of the growing community. Evangeline grew tall and strong, as comfortable in the saddle as her father and as wise in the ways of home as her mother. She never forgot her birth mother, keeping Martha's picture on her dresser and her memory in her heart. But Abigail was Mama in every way that mattered, the one who taught her to read and write, to bake bread and mend clothes, to be strong and kind and true. More children came to the ranch, though not in the way anyone expected. Orphans and strays, kids who needed a safe place and loving hands. The Blackwoods took them in, one by one, until the house rang with the chaos of a large family. Each child was chosen and cherished, proof that families were made by love, not just blood. "Remember when it was just the three of us?" Nathaniel asked one evening, watching their expanded brood chase fireflies in the yard. "I remember being lonely," Abigail replied. "I remember thinking I'd never be whole again, And now I can barely remember to count them all for supper." She leaned into his embrace. "Samuel was right. You know, this land needed children's laughter. It just took a while to find the right children. And the right time," Nathaniel added. "All things in their time." As full dark settled over the ranch, they called the children in for bed. There was the usual cheerful chaos of washing faces and finding night clothes, of stories demanded and songs requested. Evangeline, now 13 and helpful, assisted with the younger ones, her patience seemingly endless. "You'll make a good mother someday," Abigail told her as they tucked in the last child. "I learned from the best," Evangeline replied simply, later, as Nathaniel and Abigail sat on their porch, the same porch where he'd first knocked on that cold autumn night. They reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "Did you ever think, when you opened that door, that this is where we'd end up?" he asked. "I thought I was just hiring a ranch hand for the winter," she admitted. "I never imagined I was opening the door to a whole new life." "Regrets?" "Not a one. You?" "Only that it took so long to find you." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of their thriving ranch. Somewhere in the darkness, a calf called for its mother. The barn cats hunted mice in the hay, and upstairs, their children slept safe and loved, dreaming whatever dreams children dream when they know they're home. "I love you, Mrs. Blackwood," Nathaniel said, as he did every night. "And I love you, Mr. Blackwood," she replied, as she always would. The moon rose over the Montana mountains, silver light painting the land they'd fought to save and the home they'd built together. It hadn't been the life either of them had planned, but it was the life they'd been given, and they'd made it beautiful. From sorrow had come joy, from loneliness, family. From a desperate knock on a widow's door had come a love story as enduring as the land itself. And in the morning, there would be coffee and breakfast, chores and laughter, work and rest, all the simple blessings of a life well lived. But for now, they sat together in the darkness, two souls who'd found their way home to each other, grateful for second chances and the courage to say yes when love came knocking. All things in their time. And their time was now, and always, and forever enough. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed following Abigail, Nathaniel, and little Evangeline on their journey from loneliness to love, from strangers to family. Where are you listening to this story from? Please comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about this tale of courage, hope, and second chances on the frontier. Your support means everything, and I'd love to hear what touched your heart in this story.